So it's really a great pleasure to be able to be here to share in the time to recognize Howard's many contributions, the 3IE startup among others. And on behalf of Bill Savadoff, my co-author on this paper, I really want to just say thank you for inviting us to contribute to this. I had the opportunity to be on the hiring panel for the first executive director of the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation. I was not the only one. It was a panel. There were fantastic candidates. And we took upon ourselves to do what every good manager or hiring committee should do, which is to hire somebody smarter than you are. And in doing that, I think we did the right thing. So without further ado, I'm going to share some thoughts from the paper that Bill and I have put together for the Festschrift. It's my first Festschrift. It's exciting. So, okay, how do we do this? There we go. So I'm going to give you the main points, the conclusion at the beginning, and then I'm going to come back to it at the end. So first I'm going to argue that all governments have a core need to know what works, and that evaluation, many kinds of evaluation, are tools to get that job done. I'm going to give some spotty, but I think important comments about how the potential of evaluation is starting to be realized. And then I'm going to turn to the core point, which is that aid agencies who are searching for a way to have a meaningful role in a very changed world can and should help fill knowledge gaps as a primary function. And then I'm going to say that the agenda ahead is adequate and predictable support for the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation. Let's turn back to the first point. Many things that governments do, many high-level policy decisions, are done with spotty information, poor knowledge of facts on the ground. They are a function, in many cases, of social choices reflected through often faulty democratic institutions. That's okay. It's okay that governments make big choices about, for example, balancing commitments to children, working age adults, and the elderly through this messy process of politics and social choices. It's okay that they make choices about how fast to extend social services and which ones to focus on, whether to spend on the military or social welfare programs, how to pursue economic growth. Those should be informed by facts, by analysis, but in the end, those are a reflection of social choices within a nation. It's okay. But once those priorities are set through that messy process, governments need some ways to know what works, and citizens need some way to know whether the governments are living up to the commitments that they have made, whatever those commitments are. A core question that needs to be answered is simply whether the programs were implemented at all as they were designed. And this is something that I think Howard has consistently brought to light. Even when we're thinking about impact, the first question to ask is, was the program even implemented as it was designed? So for example, in Kenya, he's highlighted that an agricultural extension program, which was intended to increase agricultural productivity, you couldn't look at the agricultural productivity because only 7% of the farmers were exposed to the extension services. So just looking at the factual and absent even thinking about the counterfactual is important. But then there are tougher questions. Did the program, when implemented as designed, improve outcomes? Were the improved gains large enough to be worth the cost? That's a more ambitious question. It requires knowing the cost. And then more ambitious still, because it requires comparing two different ways or multiple different ways of spending resources. Are the gains larger than would have been produced with alternative ways of spending the same resources? These really are core questions that most governments have a very hard time answering. One of the reasons they have a hard time answering it is because there are tough methodological problems, and we all struggle with those. But another is that it's institutionally difficult, and Marie actually hinted at some of the reasons for this. It is institutionally difficult to get not just the money, but the attention for evaluation and the results to feedback into program design. This is the problem that Bill Savadoff and Nancy Birdsall and I, along with several others, talked about 8 or 9 years ago in the report that's been referred to multiple times, When Will We Ever Learn? And we concluded from in that report that the sort of institutional reasons why it's hard to get enough money or attention to evaluations that can answer the types of questions that I posed earlier, these kind of core governance responsibilities, we put them into 3 categories. One is that there are concentric circles of benefits that result from an impact evaluation. So take, for example, when JPAL has evaluated the work of the education nonprofit Pratham, and say it's their program to teach kids math during summer camps, intensive summer camps. Well, the main people who benefit from that, obviously Pratham. They take the results, if they're successful, they can use them to fundraise. If they're not successful, they can use them to get insights about how to adapt the program, and they do that. But way beyond Pratham, rippling out over different geographies over time, there are many others who are facing questions about, well, how do we improve math learning in school-age kids who can benefit from that evaluation and do, but they're not paying for it. And so that kind of core public goods characteristic of evaluation limits the investment to a lower than optimal level. Second institutional problem is that both government ministries and donor agencies are fundamentally doers. Their job is to get stuff done, not to take the time to build evaluation in from the beginning, to do the careful, methodical, and time-consuming work of learning. And they face the tension of dedicating money that could be used, for example, to scale up AIDS programs, and dedicating that to learning what's the most cost-effective way to get people on to continue treatment. That tension is very, very real, and they tend to opt in the doing and spending on implementation. And third and final kind of reason for the underinvestment and inattention to impact evaluation is an intolerance for failure in many organizations, both large bureaucracies and those that have a political dimension. And it's certainly the case that you don't necessarily want to be the only ministry that is doing tough evaluations when everybody else is getting by raising money and pitching to the Ministry of Finance on the basis of good stories. So that was the kind of storyline that we posed in When Will We Ever Learn, and proposed the establishment of something like 3IE. And then, so let me just sort of take a look at what's happened since 2006. And we don't have another world to compare it to, so this is just plain old what happened since 2006. And you can draw any conclusions you like, but the fact is that there's been an explosive increase in just the sheer number of impact evaluations. But way beyond just the numbers, and I think maybe more important than the numbers of impact evaluations, are the methodological innovations that have come about, whether it's integration of qualitative work and more attention to mixed methods, efforts to do impact evaluation in more rapid ways to make sure that the data are put into the public domain so that they can be reanalyzed, learning how to do impact intervention studies and demographic surveillance sites, a whole set of methodological innovations that just comes when there are resources to smart people to do interesting work. There's also been a phenomenal, and I think it could not have been predicted, expansion in the types of topics that are being studied. So gender-based violence, road safety, forest preservation, savings, income gains, just unconditional, transfers, teacher absenteeism, health worker performance under pay performance schemes, different kinds of governance interventions. It's really almost unlimited. And sometimes I look at impact evaluations and say, how are they going to do that? And then somebody figures it out. And then I think that since 2006, which is not so very long ago, I think there are real emerging signs of utility. And I'll put those into two categories. One is just the attention to impact evaluation, whether people like it or not, has forced a conversation, at least in development agencies and potentially in many governments around the world, around the question of impact. How are those dollars and those activities going to lead to real impact? And so I can tell you from my work at USAID that simply having the kind of specter, the possibility of doing an impact evaluation meant that people started talking about impact in ways that I do not think they had before. Then I think in terms of the real use, we're seeing some emerging examples of that. I can tell you we supported, at the Hewlett Foundation, we supported an impact evaluation of a mother tongue instruction program, so in Senegal. So the kids had been taught just in French in the program that we supported. So we supported the implementation and the evaluation. In the program, they were taught in a combination of French and their mother tongue. The evaluation results were persuasive to the government and have led to a really full conversation about scaling that nationwide. Participating in that conversation has permitted me to see how important it is for government officials to be able to see that there is evidence behind the recommendations and to themselves use that to advocate within bureaucracies. Okay, so there's been some negative stuff too. I think one negative thing is what Lant Pritchett, and I wish Lant were here, calls the hype cycle, that there has been some kind of over enthusiasm, I would say, about how quickly and how much impact on high-level policies these sorts of evaluations can have. And I think that there's been much less kind of appreciation for the incremental, the kind of practice-relevant kinds of impacts or effects that the evaluation can have. And so, because there were kind of exaggerated hopes, the fact that things are perhaps slower than one would like and at a lower level than one would like is resulting, I think, in a little bit of like, that's not working, let's move to something else. There's also, incredibly depressing to me, continued methodological debates focused on whether RCTs are or are not the answer to every possible question. Incredible that this goes on. Incredible. And then there is still insecure funding, and I'm going to come back to that, but a very small number of funders who have a commitment to this, and that commitment is never secure. Okay, so now I'm going to turn quickly to what's new in aid since 2006, and I don't mean USAID, I mean the kind of the development assistance business writ large. In terms of amounts, there's been some up and down. I'll show you a picture. In absolute levels, but rapid declines in the relative contribution that aid dollars are making to finance in developing countries. And there has been and is intensifying a constant search for what to do. Okay. Up and down, here's a picture from our friends at Development Initiatives that shows over time, although not with the last few years because of the incredibly large lag time in reporting of ODA, what the overall amounts of overseas development assistance from primarily OECD DAC members has looked like over time. So up and down, okay. So now here's the real trend, which is the rapid decline, shrinkage, in the relative contribution of aid. And this is probably a very familiar sort of chart to you, but basically the red, if you can't see it, the red area at the bottom, that is ODA. The rest are other forms of finance, foreign direct investment, and other forms of finance that are now available to low-income countries. So what you notice is that ODA is just a smaller and smaller and smaller part of the picture, and there's no doubt that this will continue. So what does that look like in a country? This is the percent of the budget from overseas development assistance in Uganda. So in 2009, a high of a third of their national budget, a third. Now down to 20% and going down quickly. So where does this leave our friends in aid agencies? It leaves them searching, and they truly are friends. I mean, this is a core part of the development community, and they are very well intentioned. But there is, among particularly bilateral institutions, a real search for what to do if they're not able to be large contributors in terms of money. So here are some options. One, concentrate in the remaining developing countries, as they say, the Tanzanias of the world. Second, concentrate on humanitarian relief. That is clearly one of the things that by force of various trends that we can't control, that is certainly happening. Third option, build knowledge. Focus on that as your core business. And I'm going to try to make a quick case for that. Aid is particularly well suited to funding impact evaluations, even though it doesn't do it much. Here's why. One, the generation of knowledge that is policy relevant and practice relevant can have high leverage. A small amount of money can really influence much larger investments that others are making. Impact evaluations can be insulated from corruption. That money won't go missing. And that is a very good thing for aid agencies who are very vulnerable when those dollars go missing. Aid agencies have the ability to bridge multiple kinds of communities. The technical to the political, because they have policy dialogue. The technical communities in the global south and the global north, they love doing that. They're good at it. And going back to my first point about evaluation being a core need of all governments, aid agencies love to have a role in public sector accountability, and this is a role in public sector accountability. And they should fund impact evaluations through a collective mechanism because they generate a public good, that knowledge, because a collective platform can generate better studies through sharing of methodological innovations. There are clear efficiencies of scale and scope. and you get the benefit of independence. If you fund another entity to manage and do impact evaluations, you'll get much more credibility, and and the work itself will in fact be independent. Okay, I'm almost done. Impact evaluations should be funded collectively for those reasons. Right now, there's a pooled set of resources that goes to the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation, and most of it comes from a very, very small number of sources. The Gates Foundation, DFID, and a couple of others. And that money is vulnerable to the whims and interests, strategies, and budgets of those organizations. So there needs to be another way for aid agencies who will recognize that this is a core thing that they can do in the future and should be doing to fund impact evaluations. So back to my main points as a conclusion, that all governments need to know what works. It's a huge need that is not being realized. That the potential of evaluations is starting to really get there, lots of work to do. That aid agencies in their search for what's next and what their core value can be should focus on evaluations, and particularly impact evaluations, and that they should do it through 3IE. Thank you.